Good afternoon, everyone. If there's anyone who's attending and would like to attend, please be seated now. Just wait for everyone to grab a seat there. Okay, I think we'll get started so that we don't eat into anyone else's time, and it gives us more time to tackle the challenges and things that we're going to discuss in this session. So firstly, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name's Chris Galliers. I'm the president of the International Ranger Federation, and it's with great pleasure that we get to discuss the topic of rangers for 30 by 30, looking at new needs and new approaches. As you know, we're all situated in a changing world. There are many challenges that we are facing, and many of them are new that the previous generations have not faced before. Therefore, in tackling these challenges, we can't carry out a business as usual approach, as the cliche would say. In this case, it's around rangers, and we are going to be talking about rangers, and obviously the discussion around the 30 by 30 targets that are being purported around at this Congress. And what does that mean for rangers and the role that rangers play? It's important to understand, looking at the value of the ranger and the work that they carry out, and particularly at a global level. And so we're going to have a presentation that's going to be provided, and that's going to give us the background and context, and that's then going to lead into a panel discussion, which my colleague will introduce that panel as we get there. So I think in terms of the next presentation, I think it's going to cover everything, so rather than me giving too much away in terms of the introduction, I would like to invite Mike Appleton, who is the Vice Chair of Capacity Building at the WCPA, and he's also Director of Protected Areas at Rewild, to come up and give us a presentation on URSA and the Universal Ranger Support Alliance, and some of the work that's happening under that collaborative. Mike, thanks.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. As Chris said, before we have the panel, I'm just going to do a bit of quick scene setting and raise a few questions and issues which we've been thinking about for some time, and maybe you've been thinking about too, and hopefully our panel can come up with some ideas and solutions. But before I start on the detailed things, I just want to pay tribute to the rangers around the world. An extraordinary body of women and men who are doing quite selfless, dedicated work in all sorts of roles around the world. The last 2 years, I've been proud to be part of the team for the IUCN WCPA International Ranger Award, and we have read hundreds of nominations of extraordinary dedication and courage and smartness from rangers and ranger teams around the world. And by rangers, I don't just mean groups of people on patrol in uniform. I mean people doing firefighting, community outreach, wildlife monitoring, tourism support work, and I also am talking about state employees, indigenous peoples, volunteers, community members, people from private protected areas, an incredibly diverse range of people who deserve your support. But we're in a bit of a crisis right now. We've just completed and published in Nature Sustainability the results of a study. It took 4 years to figure out that there are about 286,000 rangers globally. It sounds quite a lot, but it really isn't very many. There are more people working in country clubs and golf courses in the USA than there are rangers in the world. There are 20 million people working in private security companies in the world, and 250,000 rangers. So that shows the comparative importance of private property and the heritage of our planet. Many of these rangers endure very difficult and deficient working conditions, and recent reports have provided worrying statistics about those. And there is a general widespread lack of recognition of the ranger profession at the level of the ILO and in many countries as well. A lot of these people are sort of part-time, contract, unrecognized workers working in poor conditions. And if we're going to expect them to look after 30% of the planet, we need to do better. Our story for URSA starts with the Congress of the International Ranger Federation at Chitwan, Nepal in 2019, where 550 rangers from 71 countries agreed to the Chitwan Declaration, which called for assistance from the international community to help them meet their needs and requests. And as a result of Chitwan, the Universal Ranger Support Alliance, URSA, came together, firstly with 8 NGOs and now joined by increasing numbers of members and supporters, not to represent rangers, because that's the job of the International Ranger Federation, but to represent rangers' interests at the international level in terms of advocacy and policy and funding and support in order to help rangers get what they require. Rather than going into great detail about URSA, what I'm going to do is show you a very short video, one of a series of 5 we've made. All of the materials you see on here are on the website ursaforrangers.org. So let's hope the video works.
Firefighters, teachers, police officers, first responders, all are professions worthy of support and honor. We invest in them for our collective health and safety. Rangers are tasked with the same duties, and they're responsible for safeguarding the systems upon which our entire planet depends. We need to invest in rangers like we do other frontline professionals. The Universal Ranger Support Alliance is bringing together an international coalition of conservation organizations to advocate for a global ranger action plan. It will help all rangers, ensuring that urgently needed tools, reforms, and policy changes reach them. Invest in rangers to protect natural resources, to help grow sustainable national economies, to strengthen communities, to ensure equality and equity in the ranger sector, and to secure the health of our planet. If we invest in rangers, the economic outcomes would be dramatic. The global GDP could rise by $490 billion per year. In 2018, the travel and tourism sector supported 319 million jobs, 10% of total employment, and generated 10.4% of global GDP. Rangers directly support tourism, protecting habitats, teaching park visitors, monitoring species, and responding to emergencies in remote areas. Rangers protect the places that give us clean air, water, food, fertile soil, medicines, and a stable climate. The ranger profession needs to be recognized by the International Labor Organization as an occupation. Rangers are working together to facilitate sufficient training, social safeguards, appropriate equipment, and a guarantee that their teams will have adequate staff to do their work safely and effectively. Professionalize and support rangers, and the return on investment will be high. It now falls on governments, other ranger employers, and their partners to answer the call. Join the global Rangers Deserve More movement.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope that just gives you a bit of a taster of some of the work we've been doing. And on this basis, Universal Ranger Support Alliance has been working globally on these 5 main pillars of activity in order to achieve these objectives. And in pursuit of that, we've produced a range of materials in multiple languages. And these include action plans, guidance on interacting communities, on a groundbreaking study on gender and rangers, and a code of conduct which is already being used in many countries now and is getting a lot of traction to actually ensure that rangers' work is accountable. Just released in advance of this event a kind of global policy document highlighting rangers not as enforcers but as essential planetary health workers. And coming soon, we've also got universal competences for rangers and ILO minimum employment and working standards for rangers. So a whole suite of materials which we are advocating to be embedded in the programs of countries, NGOs, donors, and other groups who are employing and working with rangers. But there are still some problems looking ahead. The current deficiencies in numbers of rangers and support for them increases the likelihood of ineffective management, conflict, casualties, and abusive behaviors. We need to shift the whole paradigm for what rangers are and what they do, from enforcement to service. There are ongoing challenges with governance in the areas where rangers work. They're obviously, many of them are working in areas with major governance deficiencies, which exacerbate problems. And there is still a lack of understanding and acknowledgement of the roles of what one might call ranger equivalents, people doing analogous work in indigenous and among indigenous people and local communities, even if they don't regard themselves as rangers. If we're looking ahead to 30 by 30, at the moment, very roughly 75% of protected areas and conserved areas are state-owned and state-managed, and about 25% are managed and owned by other entities. But as we increase to 30 by 30, that balance is going to change, and it's projected that most of the increase is going to be in the non-state areas, particularly in indigenous and community conserved areas, private lands, and so on. And the challenge is to understand how the people who live and work in those areas and who are their guardians can best be supported and included in this broad idea of guardianship and being a ranger. Within the state sector, we've got this process of professionalisation, which the sort of video kind of explained, and there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done on that. But in the non-state sector, there's still a lot of thinking to be done on how to secure adequate recognition and support for the huge diversity of new guardians and ranger equivalents that are going to be in the 30% estate. And part of the purpose of this meeting is to start thinking about that. So I hope that gives you a very brief overview of what it's all about. I could talk for ages, but it's much better to let other people talk. So this stage, I'm going to ask my colleague Rohit Singh to start to initiate the panel discussion. So, and hopefully there'll be plenty of chance for questions and discussions afterwards. So thank you very much.
Hello. Hi. Okay, good. So without any delay, because I know we have a limited time, so I would like to invite our panelists. Can we start with Frankie, who is a Karen indigenous person and also founder of the Tenasserim River and Indigenous Peoples Network. Frankie, please join us. Then we have Chris Gallius, who started this session, President of International Ranger Federation. Then we have Dr. Claudia Mayer. She is head of the section of Environment Policies, Biodiversity, Forests at GIZ. And finally, we have Dr. Mary Rowan, who serves as the Biodiversity Division Lead at the USAID Development Program. Thanks, Mike, for showing that video. So we have a limited time, so how we're going to do it is we're going to divide this panel discussion into 3 bits. First bit, we're going to take a few questions to to our panelists. Second bit, we're going to take questions from you all. And third bit, we're going to show a message from Latin American Ranger Association. Unfortunately, he couldn't attend, so he has shared his message with us. So let me start with Frankie. So Mike sort of touched upon on that. There is a formal sector, ranger sector, which is the government rangers, but there is a huge informal sector. The people who are playing ranger equivalent role, they may not be calling themselves ranger. So what are your thoughts as an indigenous person and also as a person who is founder of an indigenous organization? Many indigenous people are doing this role. As I said, they may not be calling themselves rangers. What on-ground support do you think indigenous people need to defend their territories, and what are the challenges?
Hello. Thank you very much. To be honest, I'm very nervous, but thank you very much to Mark. After I listen to your presentation, I feel encouraged a lot, and you motivate me a lot, because what I'm going to talk is very relevant to what you presented already. So before coming to your questions, I would like to express about our indigenous perspectives. I belong to Karen indigenous people in Burma or Myanmar. So indigenous people are considered as a forest guardian. So when we talk about forest garden, it means protection. But for us, protection means not protection for nothing. Protection means conservation and utilization. We still consider about utilizations, because our ancestors saying said in Karen, or ti kator ti, or di kator li, or nya kator kui. It means drinking. If you drink a water, you have to conserve the water. If you eat fish, you have to conserve the lake. And if you eat frog, you have to conserve the cave. So all these are within in the river. So ancestors never talk directly that you have to conserve the river, but try to give an indicator which everything are related to the rivers. So like nature is interrelated and interdependent to our indigenous people. So for indigenous people, we go into the forest frequently, and it is our daily life. So we go to the forest for collecting our food, doing agriculture, like hunting for consumption, not for selling. So all these things are like our daily walk. And so by going to the forest like that, it is what we call a kind of forest monitoring, no, not forest patrolling. So by going to the forest frequently, we can see what is decreasing in our forest, such as logging, forest fire, poaching, etc. like that. And at the same time, we can see the increasing of biodiversity, such as more beehives on the trees, no? Like the sound of gibbon, the sound of hornbill. So all these things we know. And when we have a problem, we come back to the community and we try to sit down and find what are the solutions. How can we do that? So this is what we call about when we do forest monitoring, when we go inside the forest. By going inside the forest as an individually or as a group, we call forest monitoring. But sadly, these kind of indigenous practices are called forest encroachment. So outsiders didn't understand our way of life, and by going to the forest and collecting forest products, they see as we are encroach the forest. So I would like to come back to your questions, and my answer is in order to defend our territories, the first thing is legal recognition. we indigenous, we cannot protect our territories because the state government didn't write down officially on the paper policy. So we need, the recognition must be written on the constitution. And at the same time, we need the law enforcement. We see several times that policy, laws, everything good, everything written about protecting the rights of indigenous people, blah, blah, blah. But on the ground, it's differently. Our rights being abused in many ways. The second thing is a collaborative management structure. So collaborative means we need the collaboration with the state authorities. Because we indigenous people, we don't have authority to punish the perpetrator. So only the state government who have responsibility on law and order can do that. So this is how we need to make collaborative, maybe IP communities, forest department official, and then civil society organization or NGOs like that. This kind of collaborative we need to develop. And then the third thing is enhancing indigenous people monitoring system with the technical assistance. So we went to the forest. For example, every year in my project, we send people who are going to the forest, and some are herbalists, mostly women groups. And some are the one who expert on wildlife, the one who expert on other things. So they frequently went to the forest. By that time, we provide them with a hammock or boots or backpack, and sometimes GPS, sometimes cameras. So this kind also enhancing the monitoring system. And then the final thing is financial assistance. So these kind of things also can overcome the question what you asked to me. So I would like to leave my message to those who call themselves as forest ranger. Rangers have important role to protect not only wildlife and biodiversity, but also forest people. And then accept the indigenous people as problem solver, not problem makers. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Frankie. And I think I can remember one incident. I worked in a park for 7 years in Cambodia, and my best ranger was a Punong indigenous ranger, and there was nobody else who can show wild elephants except him. He was so good tracker. He has so much knowledge. Next, Chris, I want to ask you what Frankie explained in terms of the different roles and the challenges. Some of those challenges are also applicable to the formal ranger sector. So what is IRF doing to address the needs of ranger sector, both formal as well as informal? And before you answer that, if you could explain a little bit about IRF also, because not everybody may know about IRF.
Thanks, Rohit. Firstly, IRF is an international organization. It was started by rangers in 1992 on the 31st of July, hence the 31st of July being World Ranger Day, which is celebrated, has been celebrated since. It's a membership-based organization. It has 177 members, many of which are, 127 of them are ranger associations. So as the International Ranger Federation, we are there to carry out the interests of rangers. It's something that I'm going to talk a bit more in detail about in answering your question, Rohit, in terms of what we're doing. Just going back to what Mike put up there in 2019, I think it was quite a significant point, was the gathering. It's the largest World Ranger Congress that we've hosted. And out of that, there was the Chitwan Declaration. It was then, that's when I took over the position of presidency of the International Ranger Federation, and certainly it laid out quite an ambitious sort of list of items that needed to be addressed. This was obviously coming from rangers in the field. So certainly to do justice to that is one of the challenges that we faced as the IRF. So it was recognized quite early that there was no ways that the IRF in its current situation was able to address all those things. And obviously it's frustrating when you need to do something but you can't get it done. So as a result of that, we created partnerships, and obviously things like the Universal Ranger Support Alliance was created. We also worked with created other groupings and collaboratives. So we've got the Ranger Roundtable, which is URSA, IRF, and then the Thin Green Line Foundation. We work a lot with the Thin Green Line Foundation, who has a history of working with the IRF in terms of supporting rangers, and many other partners, and that list is growing. So that was all to enable us to start addressing some of the issues that were raised in the Chitwan Declaration. So globally we look to, as the IRF, to develop and promote the ranger sector. That's part of our mandate. So as I mentioned, we've got World Ranger Day, and this last World Ranger Day we celebrated with the theme diversity, and that's one of the big issues that we're looking to address, is diversity within the ranger sector. So that is something that we have been able to carry out some research around that, which I'll touch on. We look at also addressing some of the challenges and looking at what are some of the significant issues that are driving these threats and risks to rangers. We carry out every year, we honor those rangers that have fallen in the line of duty. So we've been looking at the ranger deaths and what are causing the ranger deaths, and how do we reduce that threat to rangers as well. We produced a paper in this last year, 150 rangers were killed in the line of duty, and 40% is as a result of homicides. So important is research. There seems to be a dearth of information around rangers, the work of rangers, particularly at a global level. So we've been looking at working with our partners at doing some of that research. We've done that internally as well, not just externally. And that is looking at ranger associations around the world. Obviously they are part of our membership, and we want to better understand how can we, are they effective? Can we increase the effectivity? What makes a ranger association work better than any other, and how does that service rangers on the ground? Importantly, we carry out networking, as I mentioned, through the World Ranger Congresses, and then obviously through our membership, and we've been increasing our membership at a regional level and at a national and subnational level. Mike mentioned the Ranger Awards as well. Also carrying out advocacy and promotion of the sector. That's a very important part, and engaging with institutions such as the International Labour Organization to get rangers recognized as a formal profession. And then also looking at the ranger sector, and in terms of advancing it and coming up with different tools to help rangers in the field, and also help any other ranger stakeholders, whether it's donors or ranger employers. And we've developed, for example, the first Global Ranger Code of Conduct, and that's being rolled out as well. We've also looked at the sector, monitoring the sector. So we have started on we're developing a framework for the first State of the Ranger report. That's never been done before. So that will hopefully come out at the next World Ranger Congress, which will be in 2024. Obviously, there's many ambitious targets that have been set. We've set ourselves, and through the action plan, the URSA action plan as well. And that means that from an IRF perspective, we've got to improve our ability so that we can carry out our mandate better for rangers. Otherwise, we are doing a disservice to rangers themselves. We've also got to look at breaking down the barriers that have been part of the sector. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we can't just carry on with business as usual. We've got to change things, and we've got to change them significantly if you look at where we are currently and what needs to be achieved in a very short period of time going forward. And so we're coming up with looking at innovative ways of financing rangers, looking at different finance mechanisms. And that's one thing that COVID taught us, that it's certainly when you get a disruptor like COVID, it has huge impacts on rangers and their work. And we need to find ways that can work around that so we don't face those challenges going forward. And then importantly, we look to create a platform for rangers so that they've got a voice. So we can get voices right from the field and they can feel empowered and talk to at a global level and a global platform so that we can get really a sense of what is happening on the ground and obviously the sentiments from the ground as well. So I think I'll leave it there, Rohit. There's a lot I could carry on about, but I think that's it for now.
Thanks a lot, Chris. And I remember when we first started talking about rangers, like International Labour Organization, when we talk about ranger rights, the first thing is recognition as a labor force, and rangers are not. Actually, in some cases, rangers are listed as under arts and entertainment with circus workers. So it's very hard to fight for the labor rights when the rangers are not recognized. Claudio, my next question is to you. I think one challenge when it comes to addressing the ranger needs, both, and I want to keep highlighting, both informal and formal sector, is the sort of a project cycles. You do things for a couple of years, then you sort of go out and then you stop doing it. And I always say, you know, working on rangers is like cleaning your house. You do it regularly. You don't do it once in a year. What do you think governments and implementing agencies can do to sort of find sustainable way to address needs of rangers and to finally to achieve the global goals or targets that we are discussing here?
Thank you, Rohit. Okay. I told you already that I would like have the answer. I do not have it finally. First, I would like to thank on behalf of the German Ministry on Development and Economic Cooperation for the invitation, because it's really a concern of the ministry how to fulfill the GBS with life. So coming from the blah, blah, blah really on the ground and have the change. And protected and conserved areas are a very important tool for BMZ within the biodiversity conservation strategy, always and when they're implemented in a participatory, inclusive and fair manner. So it's really important that the local rights of the local communities and the IPLCs are considered. And obviously, I think there's no well-managed park without having good rangers, formal or informal ranger or even mixed teams. So the approach for BMZ is really to support the protected and conserved areas, but doing also training, monitoring for the rangers. And I think this is what BMZ will also like to continue, really to follow the human rights-based approach, development-oriented, and together with the local population. We know that the relationship between ranger and local communities still has to be improved. There's a lot of potential to improve it, because often it's also the image that a ranger has, this image, the law enforcer. But it's quite more, as you already mentioned, I don't have to repeat it. And I think the trust between both the local communities, the indigenous peoples and the ranger has to be improved. This really needs mediation, conversation. You have to build trust on it, that you really can work together in a good way. And this effectiveness depends a lot also from the capacity, the competence of the ranger. So what BMZ is doing, and just let me mention 3 examples, is, for example, in the South African Wildlife College, they built up a training center for nature conservation located in the South African Kruger National Park. And it's not only it trains ranger and aspiring wildlife managers in all disciplines relevant to nature resource conservation, but also it's open for all young people, so really to motivate the younger generation to get this like a profession, as a lot of would like to be firemen, yeah, but that they in the future want to be the ranger, so it should be more attractive. And to involve them already in this work. Or another example is in the partnership against wildlife crime in Africa and Asia. Park rangers receive close mentoring and awareness training on human rights compliant behavior in the field. So they are trained in de-escalation mechanisms and anti-corruption measures. Or another example, if you talk about a sustainable thing, is the Legacy Landscapes Fund, which offer now mid or long-term financial and also equipment for ranger. And these examples shows that we must ensure that the rangers are valued. So really, it's not an image, it's also that they get better work conditions, which should be, as it possible, can be supported from development programs within the development programs. And I would like to use this opportunity to congratulate for this code of conduct you elaborated, because I think this is really a good base for future trainings, and GSZ on behalf of BMZ will support in the dissemination and help some in the translation of this code of conduct. And I hope this will help also to build the trust between the communities and the ranger in the future. I think this institutional accountability is crucial for the current and the future funding also, because our parliament often asks, for example, how do we deal conflicts in protected and conserved areas? And it's so important to show what is the common sense, what is the ethos between the people working in this protected and conserved areas. And I think that a code of conduct really can help to show that we try everything, that a human rights-based approach is applied and respected by all. So I think this can enable and motivate donors to continue funding the management of protected and conserved areas, and actively support countries to professionalize, that they have their own structure, so that it's not depending on the development cooperation, but that at the national level they have their own structure for capacity building, and that this gives the continuation to the indispensable and really wonderful work that has been and continues to be done by rangers in many protected and conserved areas. So, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Claudia. I think those examples are really good, because like training is one thing, like, you know, NGOs' obsession to go and do training on themselves is a problem, and working with ranger training institutions is one good sustainable way for training rangers, both in formal and formal sector. So Mary, next to you, how can the conservation community, governments and donors work together towards building a professional and accountable ranger workforce, which is connected to what Claudia mentioned? Nobody will invest in a workforce that's not accountable. So how do we work together in building a professional and accountable ranger workforce?
Great question. And yes, this is on. And thank you again for the invitation. This is great. This is, you know, so much of the work that USA does is on protected areas and landscapes and seascapes, and supporting rangers is critical to that. And I think I have 3 points. The first is improving, I mean, as you've said, we expect the increase in protected conservation areas to be with communities. Building on, you know, working in community conservation for decades, that role and relationship between the communities and the protected area authorities is critical, and I think improving and increasing that ranger workforce ability to work with communities and develop that relationship. Quite often the rangers are the conduits between the communities and the police, and it's that trusted sort of extension work that rangers do, and I think that's so critical, and we want to build those skills into an ever-increasing, hopefully, workforce. One of the things that we know coming from the last strategy is that the effective ranger workforce needs to increase, both in numbers and in effectiveness. Sorry. The second area is building that ranger force that represents the communities where they're working, and making sure that it's diverse ethnically, gender, and so I think we've seen great experiences where you have rangers of mixed ethnic groups working with the local communities, because then there's either a language that can be shared or experiences. Obviously, you need to have folks that aren't from the communities, but that diverse ranger workforce is critical. And I think, you know, that's something that the employing of rangers is certainly a government role. One thing I want to go back to the communities, just give an example, and this is more for donors, is, you know, quite often we'll be providing equipment for communities and rangers. And if you're providing radios to the communities, you know, it's critical to make sure that those radios connect with the radios the rangers have. It seems pretty obvious, but it's surprising how often it doesn't. So you want to have a community of technology and expertise that grows together. And the last part, I think, is something that's inherent in government role, but something that donors and conservation groups can work on, is the professionalism of the workforce. And from the government, it's having those policies in place, it's having the strategies in place, it's having the reporting systems. Quite often we ask rangers to operate in warlike conditions. I mean, they're out there fighting a war, and those poachers have better equipment. And so it's, how do you have the equipment and the training for the rangers? How do rangers know that when they go off and have, you know, are fighting these wars, that their families are taken care of, and how they are taken care of when they're injured? And then in terms of accountability, one of the things we've worked on hard is social safeguards for rangers, and the whole process. And how do you have that accountability so that if there are infractions or there are issues that are reported, that they're adjudicated fairly, that they're investigated, and that the rangers also have the support in that process. And so you talk about them in different categories. They are those first responders, and how do we make sure that they have the equipment, the policies, the expectations, and the reliability of their ministries to be able to defend that. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and look forward to the questions. Thanks.
Thanks. Like it is definitely a long journey. On ranger online duty deaths, like IRF has done a research that shows that 2 rangers have died in the line of duty every week since 2006. So that's definitely a challenge, and that we need to address by. We would like to take a couple of questions from audience. So please mention your name and the organization you are representing. Any questions from audience? Yeah, please go ahead. And if you have to any specific panelists, please.
Excuse me, I have a cold, so. My name is Mike Wong. I'm with the IUCN WCPA. Previously, I was with Parks Canada and Director of Law Enforcement, including the park wardens. Question to the last panelist. It's not a case in North America, but it is a case around the world where the rangers are endangered when they're out-equipped, outgunned by the poachers. But realistically, is that a job for the rangers? So is that another part of government or another organization that has to do their job in order to alleviate that? Because we're just moving towards professionalizing the rangers up to a certain point, but can we actually professionalize them to a point where they become an armed force, right? Which is what they're up against.
Thanks, great question. I'm going to deflect that after I say one thing is that it's my experience is that you have a whole group of rangers and you may have an elite force that does that, but I think it depends on countries and jurisdictions and what they have and who they do it, but I'm going to deflect that over to you.
Thank you for that question. It's very relevant, and I think you're right. There's a saying in rangers that, you know, if you want something done, get a ranger to do it. So a ranger's not going to shy away from doing any task that involves protecting the protected area. So if it means, improve skill sets, etc., to become elite in terms of tackling that, then they'll do that. Unfortunately, there's a point where I agree. There's certain aspects where the state should be stepping in. The role of a ranger is not to protect the sovereignty of a country. It's not the role of a ranger to protect borders of a country. That is not their role. And that should be the duty of the country's military or something like that to take on. The issue is that unfortunately often rangers are classified as, you say, fighting a war. The problem is that they're not operating under the same rules of engagement of a war. So it's not a war. So they are at higher risk than a military, for example, whenever they take on any of those situations. So from an RF perspective, we don't want to see rangers playing that role. We understand that, yes, protecting a protected area, some places you need to upskill to that level. But certainly there are areas that are outside of the ambit of a ranger to influence and affect that should be taken up by the state. So all those supporting departments and groups should be improved, because it's not just about, you know, the police forces who should be doing better investigations to prevent those criminals getting into the protected area, or it's about the judiciary who should be doing a better job in terms of the, you know, setting precedents with sentencing. So it's the whole system that needs to improve. The problem is the rangers at the front line, and they will defend and try and protect as they mandated to the protected area. And unfortunately, they are put in very compromising positions.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Matt Sykes from Regeneration Projects. When Mike was speaking earlier, he talked about the massive need to increase the workforce of the ranger sector. I was just wondering, in terms of the National Biodiversity Action Plans that will come out of the GBF, what kinds of indicators would governments, or could governments look to include in those action plans to demonstrate that they're really putting rangers as a key priority in their capacity building?
Who wants to take this? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. That's a tough one, but thank you. I think you know, previously we've had effectiveness, and what is effectiveness? Effectiveness is having a workforce that's trained, that you have enough people, and that they have enough equipment. And that's going to change by circumstance. You could have a very small area which needs a lot of rangers to be effective, and other areas where it's not. And so it's going to change, but I think it's how do you measure effectiveness, and it's going to change for every protected area and every circumstance. Want to add anything?
No, I think you're right. But there are various tools in place that do measure effectiveness. We've got MET, etc. that does, and there's other tools that are coming out. You know, there are a few that are being tested around ranger-specific effectiveness as well. So I think it's about applying these tools, but at the same time understanding that it's not a one-size-fits-all. But we do need to find a way to understand that, particularly from the ranger side, and that's why the state of the ranger is one of the things that we're looking at, is that what investment is going into the sector, and then what are we getting out of that investment.
Thanks, Mike. We can take one more question from the audience. Any more?
Thank you. My name is Jimmy Omandima with the International Fund for Animal Welfare. Just wanted to compliment the Alliance for trying to rally the standards on ranger welfare. Quick observation from the work we do on the ground: the standards of distance for accommodation in different countries in Southern Africa are so different and basic. And one of the things I think we need to continue to ramp up is the quality of their welfare for accommodation as a way of keeping their morale high. Then the second question I have is with insurance schemes. When rangers are injured, they can't work, or even when they lose their lives and their families, again, there is piecemeal efforts to do this, and to the extent, how are we standardizing that in different areas? Because we think that's a key part of succeeding to ensure the men and women that are sacrificing their lives in the front lines remain motivated to protect the heritage.
Thanks a lot. Claudia, can I ask you something, because this is related to welfare also? There are going to be, hopefully there will be more resources available for delivery of GBF. How do we ensure that rangers are part of it? Like you need to talk about the human resource that can deliver this. You can't talk about the target without the human resource. So how can we ensure that?
I would like to link the answer with the NBSUP question, because I think we only can fulfill the GBF if we think in this transformative way, and if we want to invest effectively for biodiversity conservation, we have to see what they protect for all the other economic sectors, or finally for our livelihood. And I think this is where we have to work on, that we see without this effective work, all the other development ways won't work in the future. So I do hope that we can support partner countries in this way. And then to see that the NBSUP is not only a work of the Ministry of Environment, but also the other finance, economic, health ministries.
Do you want to add something, Mary?
Sure, and I'll try and answer Jamil's question as well. It is, this is an inherently government role, and when we talk about, financial mobilization for the GBF, there is that aspect of domestic, and countries need to invest in their workforce. They need to employ labor laws. We've mentioned that tourism is such a huge aspect of protected areas and government GDP, and so can the tourist sector put money into paying for better conditions for the rangers in those parks? How do you have that partnership between the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Finance to have that? Because absolutely, if you're going to have a vibrant, healthy, effective ranger force, people need to have beds, they need to have houses that work, they need to have places for their families, schools for their children, healthcare, all of those things. This is a critical workforce that needs that support. And donors can do some of that, but that inherent basic hiring and providing those provisions need to come from government. And I think there are resources to do that given the sector that these folks are serving. So let me leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mary. We have one last question. Please, go ahead. Front row here.
Thank you very much, Rohit, to give me the chance to ask the question. Thank you very much for your presentations and all the information that you share with us. I have one question regarding the ranger things. Definitely, there are many questions as you're trying to really promote and trying to also professionalize the sector. For us, I think also for many other indigenous people around the world, in the really promoting the role of rangers, I think there are definitely many challenges. I understand that because you have government and also you have the non-state actors, or in the case of Burma, Myanmar, you have also ethnic governments also doing their administrations and governance within their territory they control, and the indigenous people. So there are gray areas where also need a lot of support and investment. We started our ranger program with the Karen National Union Forestry Department, and we introduced the forest rangers also. And then also working together with the ethnic Karen indigenous communities to also protect our protected areas. And so, and then the issue is that when the country kind of, especially after the coup in early 2021, and the support stopped. So this is a big challenge for us. And as you know, after the coup, we are facing a lot of plundering of resources that we need to continue to monitor and also to enforce and to protect. But the funding's cut also have a major impact on our work to continue this. So the question is, in this kind of areas, how any panels can answer how you kind of look into ways to support this this kind of effort, as well as the community-based ranger that also need the support. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's with the limited time, I'm not sure how much we can address, but maybe Mary, do you want to go, or Claudia, ye? Yeah.
when you talk about specifics of funding, specific groups, it really depends, groups or countries, it depends on donors that are in that area. And I think partnering with larger organizations is often a key way, but I think I don't have an answer for you. Happy to give you my card and figure out who to talk to. But funding for rangers and for this kind of work is often, at least for us, embedded in a much larger community conservation program. And I think there are opportunities there, but I don't have more specifics. Do you have anything? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry too. It was the community-based, protected area or conserved areas. There possibility for programs, but the German Development Cooperation normally is in negotiation with the government of the partner countries, so it should be combined with the government, that there are certain areas where community-based, protected or conserved area rangers can be supported.
I know it's a complex one, so maybe we can have a conversation after this. Frankie, just in 30 seconds, any final message from your side? Any final message from your end?
Okay. So I would like to give a last message, very short. Like we all want good forests. And for indigenous people, our utmost expectation is good forests, because forest is our life, our dignity, and our identity. So that is what I would like to say. But I would like to give my last word is we people in Burma, we have a terrible time, 2 years already. It is 2021 after the military coup until now. And since the military coup took place in 2021, or February, our indigenous territories become a killing fields. Millions of people, including indigenous women and children, are in hiding, and they are forced to flee into the jungle because their houses were burned, their villages were attacked by airstrike, such as bombing, shelling, by using the jet fighter. Many young people, school teachers, doctors, nurses are arrested because of they disagree with the coup. I will not ask you the thing which you can help us. I know that you can help us, and what I would like to request is just remember our people in Burma in your prayer. Thank you.
Thanks, Frankie. I'm sure all of us will. So before we wrap up, I want to repeat the words that one of the rangers told me once. We are the willing, led by the unknowing, are doing the ungrateful. We have been doing so much with so little for so long. Now we are capable of doing anything with nothing forever. That sort of summarizes the challenges we discussed in last 55 minutes. We want to add with a message from our Latin American Ranger Association representative, if we can play that video. Okay, that video doesn't work. Okay, so IRF, do you want to say anything final, any final words on rangers?
Yeah, I do, right? And I think it pertains to this Congress. I think it's where we're setting targets, and I honestly believe that many of these targets, as we've seen before, the previous targets have not been achieved, and I really believe that it'll be through significant investment into the ranger workforce that it'll give us any hope of achieving those targets. If we don't, I think we stand the chance of being here again after 2030 and looking at the sums and being in a deficit once more. And I think, from a ranger perspective, I think rangers are committed and passionate. That's why they go into the profession. But it's also important, as we said, and Mary said as well, that we have to respect the rights of rangers, that the rangers have rights and they are owed the simple things, but the right things. A comfortable bed, access to clean water, drinking water, all those basics, including insurance, etc. So although you're saying rangers can They have been working with less, but we've got to elevate. If we want to have a professional ranger workforce, we've got to treat them as professionals. And I think that's a very important part in enabling us to achieve the global targets.
Thanks a lot, Chris. So thanks, everyone. Let's work together towards more rangers, better equipped rangers, better trained rangers, and most important, responsible ranger workforce. Thank you, everyone. Some reason the video